Good afternoon. I want to thank everybody who joins us. My name is Serhii, and Ukraine Media Center continues its operation today. Our next topic for conversation is also very important. We will be talking about the food poisoning. We will be talking about the statistics, causes, and we will be talking about warnings as well. So let me introduce a speaker joining us today. In the studio is Serhii Tkachuk, head of the State Service of Ukraine on Food Safety and Consumer Protection. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. So we understand that traditionally in the summer the topic of food poisonings becomes more pressing. It's influenced by the power shutdowns as well that we keep observing. So let's start our conversation with the situation in general. So what is the statistics, what's inherent in this season, and what are the problems that we can identify? Well, that's true. During the summer season, the statistics of food poisoning is increasing, but we may safely state that this year, well, talking in numbers, so if we review the first half of the year 2024, 344 persons were poisoned by food, and we see that the statistics is unfortunately growing compared to the last year, because within the same period of the last year this number was only 271 person. So we may state about some growth of the figures. Unfortunately, it's a sad statistics that we have for the time being. Okay, so what are the causes? Do we have understanding of the causes? Well, the causes are numerous. They are interrelated. To identify the cause and effect, we need to see the full picture. We need to see this complexity of the problems that we have to take into account. If we, for example, take into account such factor as the abnormal heat, all the temperature records were beaten in Ukraine. Also, they overlapped, unfortunately, with the negative situation in our energy sector. On top of that, the consumers' consciousness is supposed to be improving, but probably is deteriorating, because, you know, as we were going out on the field missions, we see some random markets where the meat and fish are being sold, the products that most frequently result in poisoning, and I'm surprised by the idea of the people who go to the market when the temperature is like 37 degrees above zero. They see all those products being sold in that temperature, and people buy that meat and fish consciously. I mean, we cannot fulfill our obligations outside the official markets, because it's the responsibility of the local governments who allow such spontaneous trade along with the police. But again, we try to extend the advisory notifications, but I'm surprised by the position of our citizens. It's impossible to fail to understand. You don't have to possess some special knowledge. You have just to have some general understanding that you cannot do it. And at the same time, we have questions to the businesses who sell those products. Sometimes they sell those products as like private individuals. You know, it's their own cattle that they butcher. And in those cases, it's even more difficult to react when it's a private individual on whom the legislation on businesses is not, whom the legislation businesses do not cover. And at the same time, we can talk about fishery and dairy products in this regard. So people, first of all, need to understand that they need to buy those types of products in supermarkets, in the places where the storage conditions are being observed with all necessary documentation, and every operator of the market, they undergo registration. Every single small shop, any dining facility, any supermarket is registered with our service as a market operator. So if it's a Ukrainian manufacturer, you can check the product cover, product package, and if the products are falsified, they falsify the manufacturing capacities location as well. And if the expiration term is coming, the consumers need to understand, and they need to know that the expiration date means that the temperature regime for storage should be observed on all stages of manufacturing and storage. And if those conditions were not observed, even that expiration term may not be effective. So basically there are risks everywhere, and at the same time we have to understand that at the storage facility of a manufacturer, for example, in the absence of electric power, there are generators working which ensure the cooling regime, plus logistics, and of course what should be paid attention to is the way that the products are looking. I mean, many people fail to pay attention to this and continue to proceed by those products. And another cause for poisoning is that people may have bought a quality products that was stored properly, but due to power shutdowns, the temperature regime was not observed in their homes, in the fridges, and after cooking, we've made such information publicly available that under conditions like that, under the conditions of power shutdowns for long terms, the food may really become bad just in the fridge. And it's not going to be the fault of a manufacturer or a seller. So there's a number of causes, but first of all is the consciousness of a consumer. People have to be conscious of what they buy, how they cook it, how they store it, and how they consume such products. Mr. Serhii, we understand that the danger zone number one is the spontaneous markets, but we understand that there are power shutdowns, there are traditional supermarkets, small shops, other zones where we are used to safe dining to compliance with the standards. Is it safe to say that under the conditions of power shutdowns, this regime is being somehow overseen? Do all of the manufacturers and sellers observe the temperature regime for storage? Well, talking about the system of control, now there is a moratorium for extra schedule inspections. We only react to the complaints submitted by the citizens. Those are the only reasons for us to initiate an inspection. Since the beginning of this year, we had more than 4,000 such inspections, but what's interesting, 2/3 of those inspections were initiated based on the request of the businesses themselves, the manufacturers. So that's the normal procedure when the businesses submit such requests. So 2/3 of such requests, we understand 3,000 requests were submitted by the businesses, like, come inspect us, make sure everything is good. If anything is out of order, we're gonna fix it. So they are conscious. The businesses want to avoid any negative consequences from the products that they sell. I mean, I understand that's a small number of businesses, but statistically, we only got 1/3 of the requests, of the complaints, based upon which we initiated the inspections. Unfortunately, sometimes the inspections end in advisory notices being produced by our employees. And for example, I have an interesting story. Like we got a complaint from citizens that there was a food chain working in our area. They sell dairy products. The generators are off during the night. It means that 8 or 10 hours they don't have electric power supply. So can we buy food products in their store or not? So basically we went on inspection to identify whether the groceries were stored properly in the fridges, in the freezing cameras, that they may last longer. But after a reaction like that, the generator started working, and then we get a complaint from the neighbors from another building, like the generator started working, it's noisy, so do something. And again, bringing the businesses to liability for excessive noise is our responsibility as well, but again, it's contemplated by the legislation. We have emergency in the energy sector. It's confirmed by the relevant laws produced by the government. There's a martial law in effect. It exempts the businesses from that type of responsibilities. So you see, there's quite a demonstrative experience. We said, like, come on, let's gather the denizens from both buildings and ask them, do you want to sleep in silence or do you want to buy groceries safely? That's a demonstrative story. But again, the businesses respond, and we don't witness any mass food poisoning resulting from buying groceries from the chains, because they take care about their reputation. The businesses are more conscious in this respect. In the markets and in the spontaneous markets, the situation is unfortunately worse, because during the fairs the groceries don't undergo the laboratory control, and in the agricultural markets we can confirm, for example, that people know, okay, there's an inspection coming, everybody's switching on their fridges and generators, but we can check not only the temperature in the fridges, but the temperature of the food products themselves. And when we see that it complies with the standard, it's okay. But when we measure the temperature of meat stored in the fridge, it does not comply with the temperature regime, which means that the fridge was not working before. They just switched it on before the inspection, but in fact the food products, the meat, were not cooled down to the temperature it was supposed to. Okay, talking about the inspections, can you tell us geographically what are the regions where the most complaints are coming from? Where we don't have statistics, unfortunately, broken down by regions, but the complaints keep coming from everywhere. Like sometimes people call to our hotline, to the government hotline, we get those reports, we analyze them, and we respond to them. So basically there are some reports we cannot respond to due to the change of legislation. We can say, like, we cannot do anything because there are some reports saying that the citizens in this or that settlement, for example, people keep some cattle, butcher them in their private property, but at the same time they're not registered as the operator of the market, and we cannot inspect them. We cannot inspect them in their private property. We don't have such authorization. That's the responsibility of the local governments or other inspection authorities, because if such individuals continue their business on systemic basis without being properly registered, we don't have authorization to respond to such requests. So we report to the local governments, and our representatives get involved in the commissions in the same way that we work during the agricultural markets, because we cannot exercise those functions due to legislative authorization. And the local governments, they just involve us to ensure that the inspections are going on in a proper way. One of the forms of food poisoning is botulism. So what is the situation with this type of sickness? What is the statistics? Has it changed during the full-scale invasion? And what are other illnesses that we should pay attention to? I mean, those resulting from food poisoning. Well, botulism is definitely the most difficult sickness that can result from food poisoning. We had 42 people documented having contracted the botulism within the first half a year of 24. Comparing it to the year 23, within the same period there were 31 cases with 37 persons affected. Well, we don't have a significant difference, but there is still a growth which is not critical. It's like not times, like 2 times or 3 times the number of the botulism cases increased due to food poisoning. Obviously, there are other food poisonings, but botulism is the most dangerous, the most difficult case. Okay, can we understand what was the cause for lethal cases? Well, I can say that in a number of cases, the cause was the humanitarian aid received by internally displaced persons. It was justified during the war. I mean, the fact that the state control of import was lifted, including humanitarian aid, because the products were coming, but certain period has already expired. And what we support, what our manufacturers support, and what we initiate is to reestablish the import control. No, so far it's not yet reestablished. No, there is moratorium in effect so far. So what we can state is that when the expiring products are supposed to be utilized by the businesses abroad, they sell them at a low price to our businesses, or just export it to Ukraine as humanitarian aid at their expiration term. And sometimes we state that we have humanitarian aid which is basically expired, and the citizens who get such humanitarian aid should pay attention to as they get it or as they consume it. We've identified that the canned fish resulted in food poisoning in Zhytomyr and Mykolaiv regions. Well, it's a short period before the curriculum year starts. It's important for us to ensure the safety of the school meals. Do we have moratorium in place in this sector too? So how will the school meals be organized, and to what extent they are under your control? Well, upon the initiative of the First Lady and with the participation of the Office of Reforms and our service, there is a huge reform going on in the sector of school meals. It's quite an intense reform, basically, that will allow to change the consumer habits of our children, but it's ongoing, and the inspection of the educational institutions is ongoing too. Our representatives take part in such inspections. 2,669 preschool institutions were inspected during this summer, plus more than 4,000 secondary educational institutions. In a number of cases, in 50% of the cases, there were violations. 50% had violations. Yes, there were violations in 15% of the cases, and they are supposed to mitigate them. So it's our principal position. We're not signing the relevant certificates for educational institutions, for secondary educational institutions and preschool educational institutions where conditions for food storage or other conditions do not comply with the set standards, which may result in food poisoning or that may be of threat to health and life to the small children who will be taking meals in such educational institutions. On top of that, the school meals reform allowed to get the meal services by catering, which means that the food is being cooked at one place and they are delivered to school dining facilities or preschool educational institutions. But we have to inspect the facilities where the food is cooked and how it's being transported, whether all of the conditions are being adhered to, so it can be safe, so that those meals can be safely consumed in the educational institutions. On top of that, there was a lot of issues considered by the commissions of the local government with the representatives of our service. So basically this reform is underway, and it's not only about that catering. There are budget funds allocated for the schools to improve the storage facilities and cooking facilities, and also there are local budget funds allocated for that. We also review the 4 weeks menu in terms of the products that will be cooked. Those menus are agreed upon. So there is a trend for less consumption of salt, the products that contain trans fats. So this year we've already reviewed 20,000 of such 4 weeks menu. 1 in 6 were rejected, they were corrected. So within the last year, our service analyzed more than 40,000 such menus, but the season is not yet over. Now is the active phase when it's happening, and during the curriculum year, some modifications are made to those menus too, and our representatives in the regions work with them too. Thank you very much, dear colleagues. If you have any questions on the floor, please let me know. Meanwhile, I'm having yet another question. It's important to hear your advice to the consumer. You've mentioned that it's important to check the expiration date. Do you have any other useful advice that we have to take care of and keep track of? Well, the expiration term, the appearance, check the physical properties of the products, like scent, for example. But what you have to understand is whether you buy those groceries at a legal point of sales. It's a legal point of sales, it's a legal market operator, we can respond. And again, if you buy any food products, please keep the receipt so you could respond, so you could prove that the products were bought there. Also, for facilitation, we can see that you can report. The form of the report is posted in our website. You don't have to invent anything, go to attorney or anything. There is a form, you just have to fill it, and you can send the electronic report to us, and we will definitely respond. And also we have to consciously approach to where we buy food, where we store it, how we cook it, and how we keep the cooked food. Now that the temperatures are high, we spread such a recommendation. You know, now is the watermelon season, so don't buy those cut in house and covered in polyethylene film, because it increases the rate of nitrates due to the heat, due to the effect of creation of this vacuum. It increases the rate of nitrates in those products. So if you buy anything by the uncut berry, because watermelon is a berry, no matter how surprising it is. And also we have to understand that a lot of such products are being sold outside agricultural markets along the roads. So please understand, those products are not being controlled by everybody. They are not being brought to the laboratory. They're not being inspected by the laboratory. So what's going on with the nitrates over there? We don't know anything about it. So when the products come to the agricultural markets, there is the laboratory control system established there, but outside agricultural markets, there is no control or inspection whatsoever. Thank you very much for this conversation. Let me remind you, dear colleagues, joining us was Serhii Tkachuk, the head of the State Service of Ukraine on Food Safety and Consumer Protection. So take care of yourselves, remain healthy, take care of your foods, and let's continue working together for our victory. Yes, please check thoroughly what you buy, how you cook, and how you store it. So see you next time. Thank you.